3 minutes late. I'm so sorry. I was downstairs loading the dishwasher and feeding the cats. So, okay, I say that, but I was actually just in the washroom. All right. Don't make me do stuff like that. My name is Ian Hopfee. See down in the corner. If you use the hashtag Ian the HR Pro, you might be able to see some of my content, especially on LinkedIn. I'm an HR consultant and human resources. My God, I can't talk. An Indigenous Relations consultant also, because I am Indigenous. I'm not just some person pretending to be Indigenous, despite my German-sounding last name. All right. Let's adjust here. Let's check to see if I'm going live properly on all our platforms. I'm going live now on 3 platforms, and that's Facebook, which looks to be working good, and number 2 is LinkedIn. Is it working? I don't know if it's working. LinkedIn's acting all crazy here. Oh, that was slow. Let's see if I'm working. See if I'm going live. Let's go to notifications. Yes, I am going live on LinkedIn. And the third place, YouTube. Yes, the live is working on YouTube. So that's all 3. Looking good. Looking good today. You might have seen the description in today's live. We're talking Indigenous, everything, Indigenous Relations, Indigenous Allyship, Indigenous equity, diversity, and inclusion. I want to talk about specific topics. Please ask your questions. See this? Ask your questions in the comments. I will try to keep the chat open so I can see what's going on. You can see there's no chats right now. So the first person who chats, I'm going to give... No, I'm not. I got no giveaways today. Sorry. I could find giveaways, but then you'd have to pay for the shipping. So... Sorry, just got a cough a little bit. My wife is hanging out on the other side of the office, so if she starts to cough, I will try to put us on mute as fast as possible. She's just getting over her big cold. Hopefully that's her cold for the year. And we live happily ever after. Let's see, what have we got? So, to go with the theme of today, of Indigenous Relations. Oh, I'm really low down on the camera here. I'll move the camera a little bit. Okay. AKA my laptop. Now it looks like you're seeing too much of my background. I'll just sit like this. So, 21 things you may not know about the Indian Act. I mean, this is a good book to also start your Indigenous learning situation. I've got the book right here behind me. Ta-da! So I do own this book. I'm not just trying to hawk you some book I think is good. It is a good book. You need to read it. And I was talking away from the microphone, so I don't know if you heard me say, you need to read it. So I'm going to leave this one up here for a little while. That is... I would call it an essential read if you wanted to learn about Indigenous things. Basically, this talks about the Indian Act and how it is doing the opposite of what it's supposed to do. Take care of Indigenous people in Canada. And it's a really great perspective. It is an Indigenous person who has written it. Oh, what's his name again? Bob Joseph. Bob Joseph is his name. So definitely something that you want to read. So I'm going to go to my notes I have. Let's see what we should talk about till someone gets some questions up. Always looking for questions. Ask your questions. Don't be scared to put your questions in the comments. I'm out here going live, taking this massive risk. The least you can do is support me by asking a question. Don't just say, hey, ask me a question. Come on. Indigenous stuff. So I just opened my Indigenous Relations tip book, eBook that I wrote. What are we talking about today? Because I know we previously we've talked about land acknowledgements and how to do those, and the importance of those, and committing to hiring 5% Indigenous employees. Oh, excuse me, a little bit of burp there. Booking your blanket exercise. Oh my God, you want to get your organization and you yourself on that reconciliation journey. Booking the KAIROS Blanket Exercise for your organization is an amazing starting point because it's a history lesson of Indigenous and colonial relations for the last 500 years. And a lot of this stuff traditionally wasn't taught in schools. I remember my social studies book being 2 pages. Oh, there was Indigenous people here before the colonization started. And then we started talking about Europeans. And that was it. So, and of course, when governments are doing shady things and purposely being evil, you don't talk about those in the general public. And the general public doesn't believe them because how can my government do something so evil to so many people? Well, we see this happening all over the world right now. Case in point, Palestine. Why is a nation like Israel doing evil things to Palestine when 70 years ago they just came out of being the most Jewish people were almost eradicated from the planet during World War II, right? If any group of people understands this sort of bad behavior by a government, then it's Jewish people, it's the Israeli people, right? So why are they repeating this against another group of people? So I don't know. But that's religious issues that have been happening for thousands of years. I'm not going to solve that with a 2-second talk here. But the same sort of stuff happened in Canada. There was agreements made. The government agreed to share the land and support Indigenous people in certain ways. And it wasn't done properly. It was a bad faith agreement. And they've been doing everything ever since to try to get out of these deals, treaties. Let's see. We talked about some intermediate implementation stuff, and that's I don't know if I actually went into these. Oh yeah, so it's kind of staged intermediate implementation. So the first thing you want to do, connect with local Indigenous organizations. That's whether it's an actual First Nations or maybe a Native Friendship Center or some Indigenous cultural group that you have in your area. Connect with them and ask them how you can help. Don't say, I can help. That's the white savior. We've come to save you and here's how we're going to do it. No, you just ask them what they need and how you can help. Let them come back. If they don't give you an answer right away, ask them weekly or monthly until you can support them. Number 2 for the intermediate implementation, connect with a local elder or knowledge keeper and learn the local protocols and ask them to come to your office for ceremony or something, right? Smudge the office or whatever, but you can connect with an elder probably through the organization you already connected with. And number 3, invite that Albert. I was just thinking of my friend Albert. He makes, his brother makes drums, and so does he. Why have I blanked that out? Anyway, you're looking for an elder, and there's different types of elders. So there are the elders that are lodge holders, and they do smudges, and pipe holders, and they do ceremonies, right? Or you might get an elder that just knows how to make drums, and you invite them, and you make drums, right? But you're inviting this elder to come do their specialty, especially at an all-staff event or something like that. Maybe you want a prayer and a smudge at the start of something, the yearly staff meeting, right? If you're thinking of opening a new office, a store, or maybe you make a large equipment purchase, you may want to bring in the local elder to come give you a prayer and a smudge, give the good Indigenous blessings to your heavy piece of heavy equipment that will be working on the traditional territory that you're in. It'll be on the land. So it's a good thing that the Indigenous people know about it. Another fun thing I saw happen, this is kind of like number 5, is naming a room after an elder, or getting the elder to name the room for you. Boardroom, meeting room, the whole building. Again, naming that big piece of heavy equipment, right? And helping with any big events or projects that you might be doing. I went to a building that's owned by My Nation here in Edmonton, and My Nation is a Big Stone Cree Nation from northern Alberta, but they've made purchases in Edmonton to help the off-reserve members like me. And I went into their new medical building, and they named some of the rooms after elders in the community, and one of the rooms was named after my grandmother, Louise Yellowknee. And it was just like, oh, this is awesome. And this was named after her after she'd passed away. And I got that little bit of pride, and I'm thinking, oh, that's my granny being remembered for the stuff she did for the community, for the nation. Number 6 in the intermediate, research and implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada 94 calls to action. The 94 calls to action do not apply to everybody. There are certain industries, health, education, childcare, that they might have a few extra calls to action, but in general, if you're a business owner or you're a small business or whatever, you're a manager for an actual business, then you're probably going to be looking at number 92. And I've mentioned number 92 before, and there's an education element, and that fits perfectly for booking your KAIROS Blanket Exercise. If you do that once or twice a year, your education is covered. And of course, this book, right? 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, this book, and there's other Indigenous books on Amazon that are very good, very useful. And imagine if you went and you bought 20 copies of this and you gave it to all your employees as a learning gift, right? Here's something that we're working towards. We wanted to give you some additional information. So I think that would be a neat little gift, especially if you wanted to really work hard on reconciliation in 2026. Get a few gifts like this that you can give out for Christmas to your employees. That would be amazing. So those are the kind of the intermediate things, and anything you can kind of relate to those, kind of simple. And the more advanced things, I can't even talk to you about those, because anything advanced you're going to be doing is going to be in, you'll be working with those elders, you'll be working with those Indigenous groups that you've connected with to do something at more advanced. And I know I'm a member of the Canadian Council for Indigenous Business, and they have a program called PAIR. And if you're non-Indigenous business, or if you're very large Indigenous business, you can join up to their program. And it's steps proving that you're an ally to Indigenous people in this country. So you get these different levels of the program that you become certified for. And you have to go through the process of earning this designation for your organization. Let's see, maybe I'll try to pop open their website. No, that's not what I wanted. Of course, when I'm in a hurry, I can't type. Nothing works. All right. I got their website open. I will share my screen. Let's check, make sure nobody's making a comment. I think if someone comments on any of the streaming, on any of the social media platforms, I should see it in my program. I'm using a program called Restream.io. So if you wanted to join me on a live, we could talk about Indigenous Relations on a Tuesday, and we could even talk about your business. So you get some free advertising for your business. I think that's a pretty nifty way of doing things. So I'm going to share my screen. And that's not the way I want to do it. And I'm going to remove the book QR code. So you can see my browser now. And Canadian Council for Indigenous Business. I'm a certified Indigenous business. This one here on the right, certified Indigenous business. That's me. And okay, that's just the start of the page. Let's go up to programs. And here is program I was talking about. Partnership Accreditation in Indigenous Relations, PAIR. Integrating economic reconciliation through business, right? PAIR is an online management and reporting program that supports progressive improvement in Indigenous relations and a certification program that confirms corporate performance in Indigenous relations at the bronze, silver, and gold level. All right. This used to be known as PAR, Progressive Aboriginal Relations. Of course, CCIB had recently changed its name to get rid of the Aboriginal word and using Indigenous instead. So this program helps you why you get certified, right? PAIR certification gives organizations a competitive edge, building their reputation in corporate social responsibility while fostering economic opportunities. Certified companies gain greater understanding of Indigenous culture and values and promoting their PAIR level signals to communities that they have committed to being 1, a good business partner, 2, allies in advancing the prosperity of Indigenous communities, and 3, it's a great place to work, especially if you're an Indigenous person. So there's more benefits of PAIR for Indigenous communities, for Indigenous companies, right? There's some pretty big benefits there. What's measured gets done, yes. Now, I'd kind of mentioned some of these things, simple things you could start doing. And these are confirming these leadership actions you can do, employment things you can do, right? Showing that you're trying to hire more Indigenous people. Business development, you've defined as a commitment of time and money to relationships with Indigenous-owned businesses and community relationships, and that's part of what we just talked about earlier. Oh my God. So guidelines for certification levels. So if you're gold, excellent feedback from verifier on management practices. Yeah, there's a whole list of things here. And you work through these levels. So you start off as PAIR committed. And you start to get into this. And then as you grow, you go into PAIR bronze, then the silver, and then the gold. And I think it might be a multi-year process. Yes, he demonstrated successive programs through the successful delivery over the long term. So we're looking at 5+ years before you could possibly get to the gold level. So it means you've spent a lot of time in your organization making these changes or making these improvements. Costs and requirements. Ooh, there's some money here, right? What's this button? I don't know what that button is. Get committed. You got to buy your CCIB membership. And I believe this is dependent on the size of your organization. And then your application fee to become committed. And then another $1,000 for high-level feedback from the independent verifier. So this is the person that is basically auditing you and your organization to confirm that you've done what they're going to do. To get certified, That's committed. Let's submit 1 year of reports. Get certified. You got to submit 3 years of reports. So you stay committed for at least 1 year, but to get certified, you need 3 years of reporting. So it may be 3 years before you can get to a certified level. Right? An independent verifier, jury evaluations to get to these different levels. Right? April 1st of each year, you get verified if you're going to go to the next level. So right, 2,500 to 25,000. That depends on the size of your organization. So if you got 10,000 employees, you're probably paying 25,000, right? And then it's the application fee to get certified, and then $4,500 that you have to pay for that independent verifier that comes in and audits your organization to make sure you've got everything done right. And I think this is a really a valuable program that a big organization or any organization wants to get into. If you're one working on traditional territory, especially if you are working on the land. So if you're physically working out in the land, an oil company or logging company or some sort of resource mining company, and you're out there, right, you definitely want to be part of this, because you want any area you go into, you want them to know that, you're not an evil corporation. You still might be an evil corporation, I don't know, but at least you're going through some of the motions. You're trying. And when you think about the treaties and the treaty areas and how that we're all treaty people, because the treaties are between the Indigenous people and everyone else, right? It's not the government. It's with every other person living in Canada on these ceded or unceded territories or treaty lands, right? So I've heard the argument that some people think they're not treaty people because they're middle-aged white people, right? No, you're still treaty people, because the treaties are between Indigenous peoples and everyone else who lives on this land. It's not a government treaty, it's a people-to-people treaty. So, of course, the Indigenous governments work to administer it, and the settler governments work to enforce it also. But you can't, when you think about Canada, I think I showed this last week, but I want to show it again. Where did I hide it? It's a great little diagram. Where did I put it? I have no idea. Oh my God. I couldn't find it last week either, and now I'm suddenly not finding it again. Of course, it just disappears. Oh, I'll put this on real quick, just because it popped up. So, if we look at this map of Alberta, we can see that every inch of Alberta is covered by five treaties. So Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, or 10. So every piece of territory. And overlaid on this map, I just love this map. This map made by the Alberta Teachers Association is amazing. So it shows you in color the treaty areas, the estimated treaty areas. The treaty areas were not surveyed, so they're best guess. And it shows the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta regions, the white lines you see, and it shows the different region numbers. So it's a real nice overlay. And if you look down here, it shows, you can look at the different nations and they will say if they're Cree or Dene, Blackfoot, right? Whatever language group they're from. So it's really interesting to see this map. And I love showing that map because it's a great tool to start with, but I think I'm just looking for that image. I created it and then I proceeded not to save it any place. So I'm just going into my Canva and I'm resaving it. Downloading it. Sorry, this is taking long. Now I'm going to make sure it gets saved into the right folder. So I will always find it forever and ever. Now I'm going to share that other screen. Now that I got it open. Stop that. There was an option for me to replace the share. So let's see. Of course, it goes into small. Maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm being bigger here. Is good. Well, let's move it over. So this is a fun sandwich of this image. I hear a vehicle honking outside, and I feel like maybe it's my truck. So I'm gonna just check my camera. No. It's not our truck. The camera I checked, I should have been able to hear it real loud. Camera by the garage. When you look at this map, or this image, your perception of Canada changes a little bit. Because Canada isn't the federal, provincial, and municipal governments. Canada is those and the Indigenous governments. So Canada is not just a colonial government. The Canada is made up of Indigenous and colonial governments together. And you look at the relationship to the land. We say the land. Indigenous people traditionally did not believe that they could own land or own anything that came from nature. It's almost ridiculous that you could own something that comes from nature. So this sense of ownership, the way colonial governments or colonial settlers believed that they owned something. They could own the land was foreign. So Indigenous people said, we don't own it, but we use it, and we're willing to share the resources with you. And that's what the treaties were. The spirit of the treaties was, we are sharing this land with our new friends from Europe, right? That's what the treaties were all about. But the language of the treaties were in English and French and these other languages that Indigenous people didn't understand. So certain words like cede, we didn't cede the territory. We didn't give up the territory. We agreed to share. So there was, when they were explaining the treaties, they explained certain words in a different way to help the Indigenous people understand, but it's not the meaning that my ancestors agreed to when they signed these treaties, right? It is all about sharing the land. So if we're sharing the land, and in return, the colonial government, we're going to support Indigenous people and help them, that's fine. Because Indigenous leaders, my ancestors, they understood there was a technology gap. They understood that there was things that our new friends had that we didn't have, right? And that's the old story about less technological societies get absorbed into more technological societies. And my ancestors had the foreshadow to say, oh, we understand the situation. We understand that there was some sort of technology different, although we as Indigenous people don't necessarily need more technology, but a little help and support, some education, some additional healthcare, that's always nice, right? So the treaties were struck. But if you look at Canada, the Indigenous governments and the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, which are the colonial government, it's one organism, it's colonial government, but they've chosen to split theirs up into 3 levels. Federal for their Canada-wide and international relations, provincial, looking after a certain region or territory, and municipal, looking after individual cities and towns and economic areas, things like that, right? So that's how the colonial government has chosen to differentiate themselves. And the Indigenous governments do what they want to do also. Now, we talk about treaty areas. There is no true treaty government. The First Nations in each area have come together to work together and negotiate better with the federal government, but it's actually not a level of Indigenous government, because it's still kind of a European way of thinking. Each individual nation First Nation, is that green spot on this picture where it says Indigenous government. Every First Nation government in Canada is represented there as an equal to the colonial government. So I know I spoke a lot about this last week, and it's I don't know, it's an interesting concept to think about. Canada is two sets of governments, the colonial governments and the Indigenous governments, as equals. But that's not the way the colonial governments have set themselves up. They set themselves up as, like, if you read the book about the Indian Act, the Indian Act treats Indigenous people like they're a department of the government. So, people to be looked after, people to be managed, very racist view. Instead of being partners with the treaties on top of the land, instead we're being treated like a department, like we're not really people. And you think about how it took so long for women to get the vote. Well, that happened to Indigenous people also. But this is pretty high level abstract stuff I'm about to talk about. Did Indigenous people really need to get a vote in the colonial government? If the relationship had been set up properly, then maybe not. If this relationship of equals had have come together somehow at each level, essentially, then would Indigenous people really need to vote in colonial government elections? It's interesting to think, because it's a different government. It doesn't really represent Indigenous people. So it's an interesting idea when you talk about having the right to vote. Well, we could always vote in our own First Nations election to elect our chief and council, which is still a colonial concept, having a headman, a leader. Not all First Nations had anything related to this. It was always like the elders of the community who, at least in my people, that were kind of in charge. The most revered people, they had the experience of the land and the people, right? They were the ones who were in charge and made decisions. So this is an interesting concept. You wrap your head around that or not. Let's stop sharing the screen now. Let's look at the chat. Oh, the questions have just rolled in. No, there's no questions. No questions, and certainly no rolling. Turn that off again. That's kind of depressing. Ask your questions in the comments. I will check to see if there's any comments showing up in any of the social medias. No, there's not. So I just wanted to let everybody know I'm using these three social medias, the LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, just because that's kind of where, as an HR consultant, that's kind of where my business-to-business clients would hang out the most. So my target clients are other businesses, and to give them HR advice and support, or Indigenous Relations support and advice. I'm here. I want you to ask questions. Where are we? What else can I share? Oh, there was something I was just thinking of. Close that. Close that. Close that. How did I get so many windows open? This is freaking me out. You want to connect with Indigenous organizations, right? So let's share the screen with my other browser. So that's small again. Let's make it big. Let's make it big and we'll work from there. So let's look up Native Friendship Center. We got Canadian Native Friendship Center in Edmonton, Alberta Native Friendship Centers Association. So we've got a couple organizations that we could look up if you're looking for a friendship center in your area. Right, come on. Member programs, partners. What am I looking for? This is partners. These are funding partners. These are the organizations that support the Native Friendship Center, the Canadian Native Friendship Center Association. Right. I was hoping to see a map or a list of members. Let's go to the Alberta Native Friendship Centers Association. This is, again, 20 member friendship centers across the province. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, right? So there's 20 different Alberta Native Friendship Centers associated with the Alberta Native Friendship Center Association in all these different communities. Athabasca, Bonnyville, Calgary, Cold Lake, Edmonton, Edson, Fort McMurray, Grand Prairie, High Level, Hinton, Lac La Biche, Lethbridge, Lloydminster, Medicine Hat, Peace River, Pincher Creek, Red Deer, Rocky Mountain House, Slave Lake, and St. Paul. So this is, in my opinion, an easy place to go find somebody that you want to connect with. If you want to connect with Indigenous organizations, certainly the Native Friendship Center is a way to go. I thought there was a map, but let's go with, I know, I'm in Edmonton, so let's click on Edmonton. So it shows me a map where the Friendship Center is here in Edmonton and gives me the address. How's that screen going? Oh, it's squished a little bit. All right. And we can choose different communities. I lived in Slave Lake as a kid. So here's a map of Slave Lake. And the address, if you're in that area. I know I've spoken to companies in the Hinton area, and they were trying to connect with First Nations. So here's the Native Friendship Center in Hinton and the actual address. So you could phone them and go visit them or contact them and, go figure out what their programs are. Development support. Yeah, these guys, the association, they're kind of high level. They're supporting the individual friendship centers. Because if we go to Edmonton, we should be able to like click on their map or go to their website or something. So I don't know where everybody would be coming from. Let's look at Fort McMurray. So we can choose their name, have a search. We can find their individual website. I'm not sure how to say this. Nistawuyu. I'm not sure what that says. Nista. Nista in my language means me. Nista. Nia. So this is me. So I'm not sure what the rest of the word is. But right, we see all about the native art classes, tutoring, cooking classes, traditional dancing. Like that's our programs and initiatives. Let's view them all. See what they're doing here in Fort McMurray. Arts and crafts, cooking class. They have Cree and Dene language lessons, cultural teachings, right? Elders supper, grandparents raising grandchildren. That's an interesting and sad fact in some Indigenous communities. Land-based teachings, native art class. They're having their tea and bannock. I know in Slave Lake they always had like lunches that you could go to, and there was always like tea and bannock. Traditional dancing, traditional sewing, and there's tutoring, right? There's programs for Indigenous youth and Indigenous people in general. So you can look for them, look up Friendship Center, and it'll give you all the information there. Use to Google. It's pretty easy to find these organizations. Oh, that's not where I wanted to go. History. Yeah, these have been around for a while. Anyway, that's if you were looking for Indigenous connections, that's the first thing I would do. I'd find the local Friendship Center and just connect with them and start asking the questions. How can I help? What is needed? Right? How can I connect better? Right? These sorts of things you want to you want to be there and open. Get a cough. Oh. All right. Remember, if you got questions, Indigenous Relations questions. I know I was with an organization supporting them once, and they were asking about how to better relate to their Indigenous employees and their Indigenous workers. And the first thing I noticed was that the leadership team didn't have any Indigenous representation. So if your business or your organization is trying to support local Indigenous groups, first off, why isn't someone advising you that is Indigenous? Now, there are lots of Indigenous liaison type people out there that are non-Indigenous, and they've been working with Indigenous governments for a long time, but they don't look Indigenous. the old adage, I don't see me represented, right? So that's why diversity is so important, because if you got a group of people that don't represent your clients or your customers or your shareholders or your what's the word I'm looking for, other holders, stakeholders, right? If you don't have an organization that represents these people, you're not going to get the buy-in that you need, that you are trying to become a more Indigenous friendly organization. So hiring that Indigenous liaison or advisor that is part of the leadership team, part of the management team, so that people can say, I'm represented there. These people might actually be good people, right? So showing that's kind of, again, that's an intermediate to a expert level Indigenous relations thing. You want to show that you are hiring somebody who's Indigenous. And there's it's got to be done. There's always the argument that's, well, what if this other person is more qualified for it? Well, does that other person look like your demographic you're trying to get at? Like, that's just the way it is. And it's absolutely not being racist, because you are trying to give a voice to the minority class, and that's not racism in Canada at all. So using that Indigenous liaison or director of Indigenous Relations at your organization, get them in there, have someone there who can properly advise you on a daily basis. And that's going to go a long way to being able to properly support your other Indigenous employees and support your Indigenous customers, clients, stakeholders, whoever they might be. You look at any other cultural organization, there's people from their culture there. So if you want to get into that Indigenous market, you need Indigenous people in your organization, and especially some in leadership roles. Create a leadership role. Appoint an Indigenous person to your board, right? Even if you're a small business, you can get an Indigenous person appointed to your board. You have a board of directors. If you're set up to have a board of directors, normally it's just the owners that are on the board of directors. When you think about your own small corporation, right? Me and my wife are the ownership in my little corporation. And not only are we CEO and CFO, we're also president and secretary or whatever, or treasurer. Like we're doing double duty as ownership of the company. So you could create a board of directors that they may not have any sort of ownership or whatsoever, but they would be used more as a advisory board. So you would have that Indigenous person there to advise you on Indigenous issues. You could get other people of color or from different cultural groups on that board to give you that diversity that you might not see in your employees or in your customers even, because you may be perceived as this type of place. And I makes me think about certain types of restaurants and things like that. They have a certain type of cuisine, so you expect people from that cultural group to always be going there. And that might not be your target market. You might be making your traditional cuisine for the whole world, and you want to attract people from the whole world there. Yeah. Okay, looks like my wife's leaving. I love you, wife.
I love you.
So she's got a appointment or something she's going to. So think of the ways you can be more culturally diverse. It is so important. Even when I was just when I was getting my degree, we had to work in groups, and we, as an HR degree, I was taught things about how diversity is important, and it seemed to resonate more with me. I think anyone who's going for some sort of business or management degree, or MBA or whatever, like you're kind of taught diversity of the group. What's that called? Group think. So you have a group of people who've been working with each other for so long that they can't generate new ideas because it's just them in the group. They're all thinking the same way. When they're doing the stuff that they need to do, there's synergy and they're working together. That's great. But there's no variety. There's no diversity. There's no new ideas. There's no real risk taking. And the more diverse an organization can be and continue to be, the more ideas you can continually generate, right? Getting that outside opinion and those outside ideas into your synergistic group, that is so important. And you need to really capture that and use that, because the different ideas, the thought process is something so simple. You might be thinking, we just need to hire more marketing people to come into our marketing crew and design our ads. Well, maybe you don't need a marketer. Maybe you just need somebody that has a different cultural background or a different life experience. Maybe you just need that. So maybe you don't need to pay top dollar. Maybe you just need to bring in an advisor who's going to give you ideas, right? But that's where having this board of directors can give you ideas, keep you on track, making sure that you have an Indigenous person in your leadership team. I think it's very important here in Canada that there's an Indigenous person on your leadership team or in some sort of group of advisors that your organization is using. I think it's so important, because we get into these thought processes where this is just business, right? But you're missing opportunities You're missing so many opportunities if you're not thinking of the wider world and not being diverse, right? We see all these movies and things where they have a problem and they can't solve it. And then they decide to just go take a break and go have supper. And then halfway through the meal, the idea comes because they've moved out of their work environment. Now they're in this different environment with different things going on, and the stimulation is different. So how do you create that in your own organization? You're not just taking everybody out for lunch every day, right? That could get expensive, but you make sure you have some cultural diversity within your organization at every level, if possible, especially at the leadership level. There has to be someone. Oh, that's our front door camera. My wife just went out the back of the house, went to the garage, grabbed the truck, drove around the block, and is now parked out front. So she triggered the camera and the front doorbell. So we know what's going on in our yard. So don't come over. I'll get you on Ring camera. Let me have a look. Make sure we're still running live on all the platforms, yeah. And that's my new theme song. It's terrible. So I don't know what else to talk about right now because nobody's asking any specific questions about Indigenous relations. Let me just go look at my tip sheet again, see if there's something in here that I could talk about. There's my wife. She came back. She's back. I know she's leaving again. Bye, wife. So I did talk about specifically being an ally, and I guess I could talk about it again. I did kind of repeat some of the stuff that we've already spoken about, but I've put together a little something that's related to other allyship documents, and I'm gonna share it on screen so we can read it together here. Excuse me. So let's have a look at this. What it means to be an ally. Now, this is my Indigenous version of this. I've put together multiple places. You can see down at the bottom, Guide to Allyship. Big shout out to you, guide-to-allyship.com. Go there. I believe it's geared towards Black allyship, so you want to go there. And there's a few other places, pamphlets from BC, and I think one's from Ontario somewhere. Anyway, but this is where I got these, and I put it together with my own thoughts, and this is what it means to be an ally to Indigenous people, right? So, number 1, take on the struggle as your own, but do not label yourself as an ally. Continue learning. Ask the experts how you can help and be active. So remember, I talked about when you're reaching out to Indigenous organizations, Native Friendship Centers, how can I help, right? Number 2, stand up for what's right, even when you feel scared. Be the first to speak up against belligerent individuals or large oppressive power structures. So we've all been in this situation where someone is being, whether it's overtly racist or covertly racist or something, and we don't want to speak up. Sorry, I just yawned. I'm boring myself. I'm sorry. So stand up for what's right, even when you feel scared. This is hard stuff, right? Because we don't want to hurt ourselves, and it's so hard, especially when it's a peer group. So when you get in a situation where it's like, oh, boys will be boys or guys will be guys, well, that's just an excuse for a bunch of men and boys to be sexist, essentially, right? But you need to speak up as part of that group. You need to speak up and say, oh, dudes, that's a poor taste. Let's not talk about that anymore or do that anymore, right? It's hard to be that person. It's hard to be that whistleblower, right? Number 3, transfer the benefits of your power and privilege to those who lack it by introducing them into or recommending them to your networks as an expert. Okay, let's take a more literal situation. I've been giving you free content, and you're watching this and you're like, oh my God, I got a client that Ian could advise. So you're like, hi, so-and-so, I know a guy, here he is. Or we're at some sort of event and a question comes up and you're like, oh, I can't answer this. I'll bring up our Indigenous Relations expert, Ian, who will answer it for you. He is the expert, right? You really, this is the expert. I'm not the expert as the non-Indigenous white person. I'm giving this to an Indigenous person. They are the experts, right? And it's almost like number 2 standing up, but you're in a situation where it's not directly a scary situation where someone's being overtly or terribly covertly racist, right? This is me as a white person. I'm saying this is the expert. You listen to them. Number 4, engage in self-reflection of what you have and experience versus what others don't have or their reality. I think I told this story last time when I talked about number 4. I have a different view of what normal life is on an Indigenous reserve, and certain situations seem way better than others, and I have no issue. I don't have any sort of culture shock when I go on the reserve. I understand what's going on. And I know the levels of those conditions, what's really bad and what's normal or what's really nice, being on the reserve. So me and my wife took a visit up north to go visit my aunt, and we drove on to the reserve and went to my aunt's house. She has since passed away, but she'd been living in that same house for, oh my God, at least 30 years. At least 30 years she was in this house. I stayed there one summer and fall back in the early 90s, somewhere in that time frame. And I remember mowing the lawn. It was just a massive lawn I had to mow. And I had to mow the lawn and wash their trucks. My aunt, she, with her late husband, they ran a medical taxi. And so they took people from reserve and took them to town, to the clinic, to the pharmacy, to the hospital, things like that, right? So that's this medical taxi service that they ran, and I got to wash their trucks as a kid. And their house was a nice house, in my opinion, growing up. And when we went back, it was a little bit older. It was run down in a few places. I could have used a little TLC. Oh, but it was still in relatively good shape in comparison what I've seen some on reserve houses. So I wasn't fazed at all. But when we were going to bed that night, my wife, who's not Indigenous, told me, "Oh my God, their house is in such bad shape, and they have so little here." And it was a self-reflection situation for her, somebody who's trying very hard to become an ally for me and on her journey to support Indigenous people because I'm Indigenous, right? To see that this was a pivotal point for her when she realized that, you know, white culture, Indigenous culture, we have different different levels of what's normal. So she got that culture shock. And I was totally not shocked. And it was interesting for me at the other end to say, "Oh, you think this is bad?" Right? And I'm thinking, "Oh, I've seen some bad places. This is nothing," right? And so it's interesting, and it gave her that additional journey, that additional lesson on her allyship journey. But number 5, acknowledge that while you too feel pain and responsibility, the conversation is not about you. Give center stage and credit to the real experts and their story. Now, this is similar to number 4, but we kind of hone in on that. Oh, I understand this, and here's my story. Well, now's not the time to tell your story. And if you tell that story, you're actually kind of humiliating yourself because you are trying to compare your cultural experiences to this other group's cultural experiences. They are different. It's hard. I know I may do this too sometimes. It's hard for us to understand that cultural experience is completely different. And we seem to think that we can relate to it. I am very saddened by what's happening in Palestine, and I feel for these people, but I have never been in a war zone. I have never been bombed from above. I have never had my house destroyed in some militaristic fashion, so I can't, at that very visceral level, I just can't imagine what's going on. So when you think about all these other cultural groups, I haven't personally experienced starvation or heat, extreme droughts and things like that. So I can't relate to what's happening in certain parts of the world in Africa and things like that, right? I really can't relate to that. So if I'm hearing a story about someone's extreme cultural experience and these things are shaping them, I need to just shut up, right? So to speak, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about, right? If someone is talking about how they don't have fresh drinking water and they always had to walk 10 miles twice a day to get water for the family, I've never done that. We know that there are communities in Canada, especially Indigenous communities, that are on boil water alerts because they can't drink the water. Well, that water is still getting to their house. That water is still being delivered to the tank, the water tank at their house. They just can't drink it because it's not being, the treatment plant isn't working properly. So it's different. It's a different no water situation. And I remember when there was a water leak in our neighborhood here in downtown Edmonton, they had a water line explosion. I think after 70 years, our back alley, I think just like every neighbor's house has kind of experienced this water line break going to their house from the alleyway, right? And it's happened a couple times. And this one time it was big enough that the whole neighborhood lost water. And we didn't have any here in the house, downtown Edmonton. Well, I can always go to the store and buy jugs of water. It's close. And EPCOR at the time came door to door and asked if we needed water. They were delivering drinkable water to our house so that we can drink, bathe if we needed to, flush our toilets, right? They came and delivered us water. And that's obviously a different situation from walking 10 miles twice a day to get dirty water from a dirty stream, right? I couldn't be in a place and tell my bad water story and say, oh, it was exactly like this for us, because it's not. It's a completely different situation. So don't tell your story, especially if you're a white person in some sort of group of people of color, or an Indigenous person is telling their story. It's a different cultural experience. I know it is you trying to relate, but that is not needed. Just acknowledge that you've experienced something related to this. But if you make this part of the conversation, you just look like a fool. You humiliate yourself. And most people in that meeting, in that event, wherever it is, are just quietly shaking their own heads, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe David just said that. He just compared his white perfect life where the kitchen sink broke and he had to call in a plumber, and he compared it to having to walk 10 miles twice a day to get dirty water to drink, right? Like I couldn't imagine that. I can't relate to that. I can barely, commiserate and empathize with someone in that situation. So to me, to speak out and compare it to my life, which is, well, I'm Indigenous in Canada. I don't live on reserve. I own a house in downtown Edmonton, right? Like, my lived experience is different than just about everyone else's experience I can think of, right? Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing this window so you can see me all big. Oh, there I am. So that's the 5 steps of being an ally. And I think most of those steps, they can work for just about any cultural group. But that cultural group is going to come up with its own their own ideal, their own perception of what an ally for them is going to look like. So just like we talked about connecting with Indigenous organizations, if you don't know, and 95% of the time you don't know, ask. Just ask. How can we help? Right? How can I support your organization? And once you ask enough questions and support enough, then you'll be given that label as ally by them. Chat. Who's chatting? Who's chatting? McChatterson out there. Ask me your questions. I'm about to shut this down. Yeah, I think you should go look at my Truth and Reconciliation Day t-shirt and go purchase it off TeePublic. Yeah, that's what you should do. Support me as an Indigenous artist, digital artist, designer, wannabe designer, right? Go get that, Indigenous swag. What's a good Indigenous t-shirt that I got? Let's look at this. There we go. This one. This is a t-shirt you should purchase. Sorry, I'm just saving the image. Oh my god. And I want to create a link to it. How do I create the link to it? Got the link. You're going to like this. It's better than this one. This one looks good on white, but it doesn't look good on orange. That's the color of the shirt you want. Create a product. There's a product link. Upload the image. Just bear with me. It's gonna be fast. Or it's gonna be slow, and you're gonna disconnect because I am being slow and lazy. All right, I think I spelled everything correctly. And right now at the store, what is it? Oh, it's kind of expensive at my store right now. Anyway, create that. Items created, yes. Okay, let's share this one. National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Orange. Make sure you, if it takes you to the red version, change it to orange because that's the one you want to wear. And if you're in Edmonton, this one kind of doubles up as your orange shirt for an Oilers game. Anyway, certainly get a hold of this t-shirt. You don't want to buy it today. You can buy it on a different day. There might be, I think there's always another sale showing up. So it might be checking like a week. It might be $28 or 26 bucks or something like that. Anyway, that's the one you should be purchasing. Oh yeah. What else we got here? So I always think about my mother and my sister. My mother does beadwork and makes moccasins, and she sells them to people. And my sister has a craft business where her and the family are making different crafty things, and that's awesome. And I want to see them excel, and I see a lot of Indigenous artists. I know my best friend's sister does ribbon skirts. She makes ribbon skirts, and I want to see her sell more ribbon skirts. And I think to myself, well, how do we get these Indigenous artists and craftspeople out there and get them actually selling their product? And they, they're just kind of posting it on Facebook and saying, hey, anybody want this ribbon skirt, or anyone interested in these earrings? And my sister's got this amazing setup. She's got tables and a tent, and she bought a till machine, debit credit card acceptor machine, debit machine. Right, she's got that. She's got the full setup. She's got a 3D printer that they make stuff on, and it's just they make all kinds of cool stuff. And my mom usually makes a bunch of stuff to go with them, and so they go out there to the like farmers markets and things like that. But sometimes that costs money for them to have that table, right? So that's a pain. So I think right here in the top corner of the screen, Whatnot. Whatnot is an online social selling website. It's just like this. You're live. You could have your camera pointed at your stuff that you're selling, so you don't have to show your face, but you got to talk, and you can talk about it. You can say, hey, I spent 12 hours making this piece of artwork. I'm going to start the auction at $50. Who wants to buy it, right? And Indigenous artwork, people try to get deals or try to get it for free and stuff. There's a lot of time that goes into this stuff. I know my mom spends a lot of time building her earrings, and my sister does a lot of work putting together all her cool items that she makes, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time. And so I want to see them make money. I want to see them succeed. But I think they should join up to Whatnot, make some crafts during the week, and then go on Whatnot live for an hour or two and try to sell off all their items and make the money right away. Then they just got to ship the product to their clients. So I think my sister was thinking of trying to set up an Etsy store, but I don't think she set it up. I think Whatnot might be a better situation for her. Yeah, join Whatnot. If you scan this link for Whatnot, you'll get an extra 15. I think they're still giving away $15. So you'll get onto Whatnot. You'll get a bonus $15. So you'll be able to go use that money to buy something from an Indigenous artist only. So I'm going to go on there and I'm going to search and see what's going on. Maybe I'll get my mom to send me a bunch of stuff and I'll do it for her. But anyway, no more questions. If you got a question, it's too late. Remember, my name is Ian Hopfy. I'm an HR consultant and Indigenous Relations consultant. If you have questions, if you're watching this after the live is ended, go ahead and put a comment on the live, and I will try to check for comments, and it'll give us something to talk about for the next live when we talk about Indigenous relations. Tomorrow's live, Wednesday's live, is gigs and hustles. So we're talking about side gigs, side hustles, part-time businesses, evenings, weekend businesses, things that you want to build outside of your regular job. Let's talk about that. We might talk about marketing, because really, if you're building some sort of side hustle, it's all about marketing. If you're building a business, it's all about marketing. Like what I'm doing here, I'm going live 5 days a week for an hour to 2 hours, and then I'm just trying to post content on my main 3 social media where I'm trying to get clients from. So if you want to talk about that stuff, that's great. Thursday is Career Club, where we talk about resumes, cover letters, job searches, interviews, how to get a promotion, whatever, networking to get that position. Like, that's the stuff we'll talk about. I like to talk about it on Thursdays, because once a month on a Thursday evening, I think that's this week. Let me check my calendar. No. Okay, so that's next Thursday. Every third Thursday of the month, you can come visit me in real life at the Queen Mary Park Community League Hall here in downtown Edmonton, and we can have a live one-on-one chat. I can look at your resume, give you tips right there, or you can just hear me. We can ramble on about stuff. But that's Thursdays, Career Club, on my live. And Fridays, don't miss Fridays. We do fun and games. We'll talk about anything. I love games, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering. I love board games. Me and my wife love to play board games with our friends. I'll talk about movies. I'll talk about books. Anything that's fun, we can talk about it. And that's Friday. That's my let loose day. Let's have fun. Let's talk about stuff. And yeah, there's nothing on the weekends. No lives on weekends. I might start doing lives on Whatnot on the weekends. I don't know. I gotta make up my mind. It's just been so busy lately, and that's fine. I gotta try to see how this goes with these lives. So anyway, we've been live now for an hour and 38 minutes. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for being here if you were here. And I don't see any questions in the comments. So you guys have a great Tuesday. Talk to you later. I'm now ending